David Charter from the Times newspaper. Could you just confirm that if the Izmir base is to run the flights to patrol the no-fly zone, does that mean that forgive my ignorance, does that mean that a Turkish airman is in charge, or who's in charge of day-to-day operations for NATO?
I'm not certain who the exact commander is at Izmir, but it is somebody in a NATO appointment. So the nationality in that context is in my view, in a NATO context, is not important. He's operating as NATO. It could be Turkish, it could be US, it could be somebody from any of the NATO nations who happens to be in a NATO appointment within that headquarters. As I say, I don't immediately know the nationality of the commander there at the moment.
Just a quick follow. Is it known who the commander of the no-fly operation is?
Well, the overall command of the operation rests at Joint Force Command Naples. I don't know the details at this stage of who an individual is who's been nominated.
Peter Winkler, Neue Zürcher Zeitung. In the last week, there have been several airstrikes against ground targets in Libya. How does this come in with an interdiction of all unauthorized flights, or will these flights still be authorized?
If there is a requirement for operations to be conducted outside of the no-fly zone mandate, i.e. that would be a liaison with the coalition, that would have to be a nominated and notified flights so that the NATO chain of command is aware of those flights that carry on. My understanding at this stage is that the majority of those missions appear to have been successful, and therefore I would assume are close to completion. But I can't say at this stage. If coalition flights need to continue outside of the NATO mandate, that would have to be done through a coordination process through the chain of command for those flights to be allowed in and out of the airspace.
NATO and the coalition will ensure coordination
Yes.
and deconfliction for as long as these operations run in parallel. As I said, NATO ambassadors have decided to actively consider taking over the full UN mandate. Obviously, we can't prejudge those deliberations. Those are important political deliberations. All 28 allies have to reach consensus. We would expect a decision on that within the next few days. Dieter.
From DPA, the German press agency. Following this up, is my understanding correct that if NATO is taking over that broader role within the next couple of days, this would mean de facto or de jure, if there is anything like that, the end of the coalition, that then all military decisions, perhaps under the political advice of representatives of the participating countries, but all military decisions would be made by NATO authorities?
That, at this stage, of course, is a hypothetical question. What I can say is that the political direction of any NATO military operation is the responsibility of the North Atlantic Council, the 28 ambassadors of the allied nations. So command and control of NATO military operations, of course, is NATO's business. Now, NATO is taking action as part of the broader international effort to fulfill the UN mandate. We will fully include contributing partners from Arab countries and other nations in our deliberations. And as I said, ministers meeting next Tuesday in London are expected to set the wide political guidance. The Secretary General will be in London. He will take part in those deliberations. We are acting in coordination with, as part of the broad international efforts to protect civilians from the continuing violence of the Gaddafi regime. Nawab.
Nawab Khan from Kuwait News Agency, Kuna. Anna, which Arab countries are participating or will participate in the no-fly zone? Thank you.
I can't give you any details right now. What I can say is that the Secretary General has spoken to several Arab leaders of Arab partner countries, and they've welcomed NATO's decision to implement the UN mandate to enforce the no-fly zone. David.
Oh, yeah, David Brunstrom from Reuters. Group Captain, could you tell us how many aircraft are likely to be needed on a daily basis and overall in this sort of mission?
I don't have the numbers immediately enough at my fingertips, but in essence, it is a variable depending upon the situation. But so it's very difficult for me to just come up with a number off the top of my head. I mean, what I think is perhaps best is that if we take that. We'll see as the situation develops, and then we can come back and give you an answer on that one in due course, rather than me just trying to pluck numbers off the top of my head. I mean, no-fly zones are resource intensive. If you are going to do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it requires a significant number of aircraft and supporting assets.
Dozens or hundreds?
Dozens, I would say, not hundreds.
Yes, Captain, I was again about to ask with regard to the composition. If it's 24/7, it's at least 2 AWACS, it's at least air refillment, so 1 or 2 KC-135. It's at least protection of the tankers and the AWACS with the pilots and fighters. So can you give us at least not the composition, but the type of forces we'll need? Second, the rules of engagement. So if there's a threat coming from the ground to NATO airplanes, in which kind of rules they could, answers to this threat, and whether there's a threshold on the flights, whether it's low flights, high flights, 10,000 feet, 15,000 feet, 18,000 feet, etc., and where all these airplanes will be based, whether it's going to be the base, where is it, Naples, or will it come from Geilenkirchen, or will it come from Konya, or from where else? So to provide the material. Thank you.
And Gül, could you please introduce yourself as well? For the group?
Sorry, it's Sonomot from NTV Turkey.
Okay. Right. The assets that are likely to be involved, you will have, if I go back to my initial point of situational awareness, AWACS, of course, is well known in that capacity and has been operating recently in the Mediterranean. Anyway, that will continue. So there will be AWACS coverage. They will provide that 24/7. You will effectively do that with 3 aircraft per day. On top of that, there will be other surveillance assets to produce effectively an intelligence picture of what is going on within the area. And then you have the fighter aircraft that will actually enforce the no-fly zone. Those are the ones that you've probably already seen pictures of on the media, that then will go on a type of combat air patrol in communication with the AWACS, and they react to anything that then comes into the airspace. Going to your point about what happens if there is a threat, well, rules of engagement are in place of that. Everybody operates within a right of self-defence. That's a fundamental rule of engagement for all operations. So if they are directly targeted, then crews are able to act in self-defence. If, however, they are just threatened, then there are rules of engagement that allow you to report that back through the chain of command and then react to those as required. And I'm sorry, was there another final point to the question? I mean, I think it was basing.
With regard, the flight, whether it's going to be a high altitude mission, low altitude mission, etc., etc.
Well, at this stage, my understanding is there is no delineation between high or low. Clearly, your reaction and response depends upon the environment in which the aircraft comes. If it's something that's flying through the airspace at medium to high level and appears to be a civil airliner, then that's not something that's an immediate threat to people on the ground. So you respond accordingly to that and would take action to get the aircraft to leave the airspace. If it's an attack helicopter at low level that appears to be already firing on somebody, then you react accordingly.
At what time exactly will NATO take over the command of the no-fly zone? And before this is done, will there be some kind of interruption or a formal end of the coalition activities, as Turkey has reportedly demanded before?
The exact timings, as yet, I am not privy to. Clearly, there was a decision late last night. From my own experience, I would say that the Air Operations Centre that will take over this probably needs 48 hours to produce its own set of tasking orders and requirements. So it allows really a period of time for briefings from the senior command elements of the coalition operation to make sure that their NATO counterparts are fully briefed on what has been done, what is in place, and how that will continue. I suspect that for many of the crews, if you like, at the tactical level, enforcing the no-fly zone, this will be completely transparent. They will get airborne with a briefing and a set of ROE and a set of orders that has come either from the coalition, and then at some point you are briefed and you are now operating under NATO rules. It's actually more routine than you might think within that context. But I don't have a specific time. I do not believe there will be any break in the no-fly zone, which is already in place. There will be no window of opportunity for people to exploit that changeover.
We symbolic closing down of the coalition operations to have a clear distinction. This now the coalition operation ends and now NATO takes over.
Well, that can be done symbolically, but if you're enforcing a no-fly zone for 24/7, then there needs to be no break physically in patrolling the no-fly zone.
We assume that this will be done in a matter of days and that any transition will be seamless.
Sert Açak'tan IHA News. You said the rules for engagement is right of self-defense. Well, since after you start enforcing the no-fly zone, it's very likely that the aggression will come from the ground. At that point, self-defense means bombing the ground. So what does it make difference than the coalition activities? What difference will it be between the coalition activities and NATO activities? You will be still doing a no-fly zone plus. So could you?
No, I'm not sure that that's quite correct. Basically, you have if you have a threat to you specifically from the ground, we're not talking here about whether pro-Libyan forces, pro-Gaddafi forces or non-pro-Gaddafi forces are fighting. What I'm saying is that if you are threatened by, say, a surface-to-air missile system that's stopping you enforcing the no-fly zone, you have the right of self-defense. If air-to-air anti-aircraft guns attack you as an aircraft enforcing the no-fly zone, you have the right to respond. The no-fly zone does not give you the right to just go and if you like, as you put it, bomb targets on the ground.
And may I stress that NATO operates fully within the UN mandate, and that mandate is the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1973. Thomas and Nureddin, and I'm afraid that's all we have time for. So Thomas first, and then Nureddin.
Yeah, microphone.
The Qatari and Emirates planes, do they talk to you at all? Do they take orders from you, or they only answer to the coalition at this stage? And how big remains the threat of Libyan air defense after 1 week of operations, to your knowledge?
Okay, I personally don't have any details at this stage about the arrangements for the Qatari aircraft. We have significant experience in current NATO operations of non-NATO partners joining the operation. That detail will have to be worked out. They would then, at some stage, come under NATO command and control. Within that process of being the rules of engagement, they would have to accept to participate. But as with many other operations, it's not just NATO forces. So that will have to be arranged in due course. As I understand it at the moment, those forces are only through the coalition. So that will be something that needs to be developed in due course. And sorry, what was the second part of your question?
How big is the threat from Libyan air defense after 1 week of bombing, according to your information?
It's difficult for me in a position here to give you a categoric answer on that. I would say that from my reading of the situation, it's been significantly degraded.
And Thomas, obviously, Qatar is one of NATO's long-established and valued partners in the region. There are many countries in the region that have well-established links with NATO, and so this is something that we will build on, we assume, in this NATO-led operation. Noureddin?
These days, one nation, let's say it's France, was keeping saying that Arab countries do not want to be, let's say, either NATO or working as NATO umbrella or something like that. Did you have any statement from any country, those with whom you have dialogue in the Ukrainian dialogue or the ICI framework? Did you have any get any negative or reservation from our countries? And can I ask you a small other technical question? When we see the map of the Arabs embargo, the map that you gave us, I think, this week, the zone of Tobruk to the Egyptian side is covered by the map. I mean by the red line, which means that the area that you are covering. What happens? Do you allow that for the opposition to get the arms from this arms supply from this area? And you said earlier that the no-fly zone is covering, let's say, the coast area. What about the inside country? Because Libya isn't preventing it.
I'll just cover that last point first. The no-fly zone is established over the entire area of Libya. The focus, particularly on situational awareness, initially has been on the coastal regions, because that is where the effectively militarily, that's where the concentration of forces are. So that's where you need to know specifically what's going on. As for the embargo area, that's not, the no-fly zone is complementary to the embargo, but the no-fly zone specifically covers the airspace over Libya. The other aspects of the embargo, I do not have the detail of. I'll leave that to you, Alon.
Obviously, the arms embargo operates all along the Libyan coast. On relations with Arab nations, as I've told you, the Secretary General has had and continues to have contacts with leaders from the region. They welcome NATO's contribution. These are long-established, valued partners, and they have experience of working with NATO, and NATO will fully include contributing partners from Arab countries, from other nations in its deliberations. This is part of the broad international effort to support the people of Libya. Thank you very much. That's all we have time for. We'll probably see you again soon. Thank you.